Pain is inevitable, but suffering is a choice. I really love how powerful and hard-hitting that quote is. And it was the first thing I thought of when I heard the word detour. Because to me, detours are these events and experiences in our lives that force us to take these alternative paths. And that can be very difficult and painful. So how many of these experiences can you think of where something hasn't gone your way, no matter how big or small it is? And even think about how unexpected these were in the first place. So yes, pain is inevitable. But what I want to talk about today is the second part of that quote, how suffering is just a choice. Because no matter how much we want to, we can't avoid or reverse what has already happened. And so what's more important to focus on is what we have control over, which is what comes after in our actions and attitudes. Now that's something I had to learn over time. And it actually started when I was 16, when I faced my first major detours. My grandma, who I was really, really close with, and we all lived with at the time, unfortunately passed away from heart failure 4 days before her life-saving surgery. And then in a couple of weeks, I failed my piano diploma exam, which I essentially worked incredibly hard for the past 10 years. Those hit really, really hard for me. And particularly because life just seemed to be going so well up until then. Of course, there were some bumps here and there, but nothing that completely swept me off my path. And as the year progressed, there were more and more roadblocks in my way. And even though I was developing this awareness of how life isn't just a straight line, I just couldn't deal with it all. After the loss and failure, none of the highs during that time, and yeah, I still had some victories here and there, but none of those moments were enough for me to look past these painful moments. And yes, it's normal and even necessary to grieve after these moments. But to me, I just didn't see a way out because I thought suffering was the only choice. And so I became increasingly bitter towards myself and constantly beat myself up for every little thing that I did. I became incredibly angry, not only at myself, but the world around me. I began blaming my circumstances, pointing fingers all around me. Worst of all, I disconnected from my loved ones and shouldered all the emotion and thoughts to myself. Eventually, it got to a point where I did not even recognize myself anymore. See, in front of my friends and family, I was doing amazing. I was achieving these great results and right on the path to be a high-achieving A+ student. But in private, I was this hopeless teenager who didn't know who he was, didn't know where he was going, and was so full of hatred towards himself and the world around him that it just got too much. Because as it kept building up and building up, I just couldn't take it anymore and eventually decided to end my life. But what happened after was once again not what I expected. See, it was around 3 a.m. and coincidentally, the exact moment I was ready to commit, I heard my dad coming from his bedroom and started walking towards where I was in the house. I'm not sure what it was. Maybe it was a sense of guilt, but I chose to stop. Until this day, I'm not completely certain why I did choose to stop. So I do recognize that there are people listening in right now where You have your own experiences with suicide or mental health or with whatever pain that you're going through. So that was my personal experience. And I tell that story because that was my wake-up call, to take a real good look at myself. The weeks after that were incredibly numbing. And for context, it was actually during my year 12 exams as well. But after everything subsided, and as I got more time to reflect, and through a lot of support from my girlfriend, something I had to come to terms with was that leading to that downward spiral were just a simple set of decisions all made by me. No one made me do any of that except myself. And so that is the first key step. Realizing that your life is your responsibility. And I say that because I believe that everyone has the power to take that control with their actions and attitudes moving forward. And yes, whatever cards you're dealt with can be completely against you and seem way out of your control, but what comes after is in your hands. And so the big question now is, what do I do with that responsibility? And that's something else I had to learn throughout my reflections, was noticing that my choices in response to those detours when I was 16, 17, and 18 were all based on what I knew at that time. So if I wanted to go down a better path and make the most out of this second chance in life, then I had to make some serious changes in my life, because there's no way that I could do the same thing over and over again and expect different results. Now, of course, I didn't know what was different. I didn't know what to change, but I took that responsibility. And moving into the new year of 2020, my sole objective was just to meet as many new people as possible, get into as many new opportunities, and just learn new perspectives in life and to see what is out there, because obviously I was missing something. And it was actually my girlfriend and my best mate who just constantly pushed me and encouraged me to always apply to new things, whether it was a job or a club, whatever it was, despite the mass rejection that I got during that time. But that dedication to change and seeking out new perspectives led me through so many new doors and allowed me to meet so many more new people that I would have never expected. One of those clubs, university clubs, was called Rise. And that was when I was introduced to a realm of personal growth, which blew my world wide open. But more importantly, surrounded me with this community of people who allowed me to shift my mindset towards a more positive and proactive one. And that was incredible for me, because even though we went into that hard lockdown and everything was online, we were still able to run these events. We were able to facilitate friendships and help other people have realizations in their own lives. And so through that new discovery and that new path, yes, the lockdown was incredibly restrictive and tough to go through. I learned and realized fundamentally that suffering wasn't the only choice. And so that's the second step. After we're able to take that responsibility and realize our control, then it's actually about looking within ourselves and changing our internal world before our external world. I mean, let's think about when you don't get an assignment mark that you want, or maybe you didn't get a job or internship that you wanted. Well, what's the first thing that we think about of changing? The result, the outcome. And that's completely normal to think about. But what I've found is what's more important to focus on is the processes leading up to that moment. What was your mindset going into it? What were your study habits? How did you prepare? See, it's so much more important to dig deeper and look at the layers underneath, because something I've learned with the people that I've associated with is that you cannot change the fruits in your life without examining the roots of the issue. So for me, my fruit is that I wanted a better life. But through examining the root system, it was all over the place. Right? Poor self-image, little confidence, and little resilience, you name it. So the consequent changes I needed to make was directed to strengthening my root system. I began reading more personal development and leadership books. I began talking and associating with people who were a lot more successful than me so that I nurtured those roots that would eventually lead to the fruits of a better life. And since adopting that mindset of constantly seeking new information and changing and updating the roots of my own life, life has never been more exciting and fulfilling. And I believe the quality of your own life will improve as well by adopting a similar mindset. But does that mean life suddenly and automatically becomes perfect and easier? Absolutely not. There are still going to be challenges we face in our lives, and arguably more challenging things in our lives. But the idea is that if we're able to strengthen our foundations, it prepares us well to use that responsibility a lot better to make those choices moving forward. See, at the start of the year, I actually began relapsing into my past negative self. And when those thoughts started to creep in, it shocked me, right? Because I thought that I had conquered it. I had grown to this person and completely thrown away the past. But as those thoughts began to re-enter my mind, it felt like I was back at square one. But it was because of nurturing those roots and dedicating myself to change where I realized I had more options to go down. And I saw, that relapse as an indication to lean into the resources that I developed and the people that I met. And eventually, through the guidance of the mentors that I met during that time, was where they helped me realize the importance of owning my past. See, my intentions with changing and growing, which was great in itself, but the intention behind it was to run away from my past, forget about it all. But in fact, it's actually important to come to terms with it and owning whatever we've gone through. Because I believe everyone's past here deserves to be recognized as well, no matter the highs or lows of it, because that's the final step. Because through owning our past, we're able to come to terms with those moments, those detours, no matter how painful it is. And as soon as we try to completely delete that from our lives, those demons eventually come back. So since then, that was when I began to talk more about my suicide experience, my mental health issues, and talk more about my struggles. And the more I talked about it, the more I realized that I took ownership over it. I took more ownership over it, and the past no longer ate away in my mind, and suddenly things started to feel a lot more clear. It's been almost 2 years since that night, and to be in this position where I'm able to share this story, this ongoing journey with you all, I see it as an absolute honor and privilege. We all go through pain. We all struggle in our own unique way. That's something we can't help. But as soon as we accept our responsibility, change our roots, and own our past, are we really able to ground ourselves for whatever detour comes our way?